The next person I have the honor of introducing is also a very long-time friend of mine, named Rebecca. Rebecca called me, God, is this about 6 years ago now, maybe? 6 years ago, and said, Johnny, I found your website. I'm obsessed with your website. I love what you guys are doing. I read it 3 hours a night, every night, going over it and over it. And this really, what you're doing applies to things beyond cancer. And we do one-on-one cancer support, mentoring for cancer. But she said, you know, I was affected by spinal cord injury. When I was 13, I was in a car accident, as she told me, and paralyzed from her chest down. And as you might imagine, her life changed immediately, in a second, in a day, and how to go forward. And she said, you know, I wish there were someone at 13 I could have talked to who was 26 or 28 who said, you know what, at 13, I went through that same experience, and I thought my life might never be the same again. It would never have worth in it again. But 10 years later, I've found there is a beautiful life ahead. And what she has created is a beautiful thing that she'll tell you more about, called Backbones, where someone who is affected by spinal cord injury is able to reach somebody who's farther along and has gotten back into life and is happy and living strong and has a positive outlook on life, to show people that it is possible and there is hope. So without further ado, the very inspirational, amazing person who's helped so many in similar situations, Rebecca Torres. Please, round of applause. Round of applause.
Thank you, Johnny. Always awesome introductions. So like Johnny said, I'm the founder of Backbones, and at the age of 13, I was on a family vacation, and I was in a car accident and was paralyzed from the chest down. And ever since I was young and I was a kid, I wanted to be a fashion designer. So when this happened, I thought that my plans were over and I wasn't going to be able to be a fashion designer until I found a way to adapt, and I found a way to learn how to sew again. And I ended up graduating from high school, learning how to sew, participating in fashion shows, and I went to school for fashion design and eventually graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in theater arts. This gave me the confidence to, go forward and pursue fashion design. I came back to Chicago, and I did costume design for different theaters and dance troupes around the country, around the city. And simultaneously, I was also doing advocacy work and disability rights work. And so one day, like Johnny said, I went to a fashion show, one of their events. I had no idea it was an Immerman Angels event. Somebody gave me a card. I went home, looked at the website, and I was in awe. I couldn't believe that there was something like this, and it was such an easy model. It was effective, and it was so needed. And if I would have had someone at 13, it would have been great. It would have saved me a lot of hardship and learning on my own. I contacted him, and he's been guiding me and been, I guess, a sort of a mentor angel, and has been helping me, work through Backbones. I actually had no idea what I was doing from the very beginning. I didn't know how to get started, and I have this creative mind, and I didn't know if I was going to be. I jumped from one idea to the next, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to merge my left brain and my right brain and make it work, but they work. They work together. So sometimes I'd get a little bit discouraged when I would see, other organizations that were doing similar work, and I felt maybe, they were going to see me as competition, and they weren't going to accept me in the nonprofit world, until I realized that we all have our own voice. Whether we're doing similar work, we have our own voice, and we all have our organizational culture. And so instead of viewing others as competition, I was I decided to find a way to work together and serve the people that we're serving. So Backbones was founded in 2009, and we provide one-on-one peer support for people with spinal cord injuries and their families. And in addition to that, we host events to get people out and meeting each other, and it sort of ends up being an alternative to a traditional support group, because people start talking and exchange phone numbers and become friends and learn from each other. And we also make it a point to make sure that these events are not exclusively for people with disabilities. The reason that we do that is to engage more people and get people to care about what we do. For a long time, for the first couple years, I was constantly getting asked, I'm not a person with a disability, I'm not a person with a spinal cord injury, but I really want to help. What can I do? And I really didn't know what to say to that. Sometimes I just say, oh, well, this event is coming up, why don't you volunteer? But I could see in their faces that they weren't satisfied with that. They wanted to do more, and they wanted to really become involved. So I started thinking, and then it clicked, and I realized that what was happening is we were separating them and us. We were separating people with disabilities from people without disabilities. And there was this invisible line, and that needed to change. We needed people to start losing that fear of being around someone with a disability, or just knowing what a disability is. And so we also wanted them to learn that a wheelchair is something that doesn't mean limitation, but it means something different to the person with a disability. It actually means freedom for them to be independent and to be able to live their lives independently, doing the things that they want to do. And they also needed to learn that wheelchairs were pretty cool and could be sexy too. So at all of our events now, we started bringing wheelchairs, extra wheelchairs, and we allow able-bodied people to be able to use them and to participate, whether it's a scavenger hunt or a fashion show or a 5K, whatever it is. The wheelchairs are there and they're available for people to use and just sit in them, because what other opportunity is someone going to have, or to just come across a wheelchair and mess around with one if they want to? They're not just available anywhere. So as thinking for different ways on how we can get people involved, I started reading, participating in webinars, and I kept on seeing the same thing. I kept on seeing stories. Tell a story to engage your donors, engage your volunteers. And again, I started thinking, and I said, this is what we need to do. And we started using stories, and it started to work. And by doing this, I would start seeing that people would share their stories, and assumptions would shatter. People started feeling like they understood, and people would ask more questions and begin to learn about each other, whether it was a person with a disability or without. So I said, why not make everything about stories? Why not start using the stories in our blogs and our newsletters to teach people? And we've been able to use stories to share information and to reach newly injured people, but as well, we've also been able to motivate them by example and teach others what it's like to have a disability, how to approach someone with a disability, what to say to them. A lot of people don't know what to say, they feel uncomfortable. So they've been very helpful. And I found out that stories work, which is probably something that I should have learned in my theater arts classes, because it's, storytelling is the most primitive and, ancient form of passing down information and learning. But I also think that my theater background has helped me with volunteers as well. When I arrange duties on what they have to do, and I love watching them excel in what they're skilled at, and it's almost like putting together a production, a show. You have to make sure the director is on board. You have costumes, you have lighting, and you have to make sure it all works together in order to make magic happen on stage. And that really is a really fun way for me to think about volunteers and their help with us. I've learned that they're actually our most valuable and our cheapest ambassadors, because they do the work and they tell their friends about it and they're excited, and it's great. I get sometimes volunteers that say, "Oh, I'm just a volunteer," and that sort of gets me mad, because you're not just a volunteer. You're a volunteer. Own up to it, and take the credit for it, because you're really doing something for an organization, and you should be proud of it. So I really like to value our volunteers and make sure that they know that what they do is amazing. So as I'm here learning, and I go, and I'm starting to absorb knowledge from everybody here, and I feel like there might be some veteran nonprofit leaders out there, and you may see the things that I'm saying as like a child, maybe with grand ideas and lofty dreams, but I hope that it stays that way, because I'm really proud of where Backbones is right now and where it's going in the future. Yeah. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Rebecca Torres. Beautiful work she's doing. Serving a need clearly that is not being met. So that is wonderful, wonderful pioneer work. It's beautiful things you do. I've met a lot of the people she's helped, and talk about impact. Yeah, she's amazing.